right, those two up top. This one up front. Yeah, put the hand wires on the outside. Just fire them up. That sounds great. Hey everyone, welcome to our show. I am grateful to have Rick Heins here, who is our Senior Product Manager for Electronics. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Very cool to have you here. As you can see behind us, we have a stack of amplifiers. As we get into this video, we'll go through some of the lower wattage amplifiers and talk about those models, as well as the louder amps, which are like the twins and the supers and basemans. But I want to start off the conversation because it's a big question I get a lot. And we see it a lot, online. We're getting the questions, like, how do I use a tube amp? What is it about a tube amp? And I want to ask you, because we're both fans of tube amps and you work in this world. So in your words, like, what is it about a tube amp that makes it so appealing to a lot of players?
I think it's a hard thing to quantify in words. It's more about hearing it, and when you play through a tube amp that you really understand what it does. Mm-hmm. There's something about the articulation, about the sag, about the way that it responds to your playing. We use all these silly words to describe what it does, but ultimately, it just feels like a natural extension of playing a guitar when you play through one. You feel it and you hear it. And that's why sometimes when you talk about it, the best thing you can do is just get in front of one and play one, because it becomes very apparent once you hear that sound, and it surrounds you.
Kind of walk us through, without getting too scientific, the inner workings of really what it consists of inside a tube amp.
Yeah, well, ultimately, I think it just goes back to the fact that when people were performing live, they needed to be heard because they were playing in bigger and bigger places, so amplification came about. You've got preamp tubes that they actually amplify the signal of the guitar, and then you have power amp tubes that are actually going to help you with the amount of power that the amplifier has, so when you play through it, the bigger the transformer, the bigger the tubes, the louder the amp's gonna be. So, as time goes on, they get bigger, they get louder, because people need to play in bigger and bigger places. And really that's where it came from, and to your point, they used to be in everything, and most stuff that we have now doesn't have tubes, but guitarists absolutely love tubes. A lot of them demand that that's what they have, and so there's a whole industry of us making tube amps like we did in the 50s and 60s. To replicate that sound, and nothing else quite satisfies those people's tastes quite like a tube amp.
Yeah.
But generally with Fender amps, the preamp tubes aren't really set to distort the amp. It's usually when you get into the power section that you get the distortion. So most amps, with the exception of the supersonic, it's the power amp that you're hearing distort. And it's once you get the power tubes going past the point where they're going into clipping that you get that wonderful sound that's very hard to replicate any other way.
All right, let's talk about some quick tips and tricks for basic tube amp operation. I have two amps behind me, the 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb and an Anniversary Blues Junior. And I also, before we go any further, I have some pedals on the floor that I might use later, and I have this really cool ABY Fender switch as well. All right, so let's talk about master volume versus non-master volume. And that simply refers to the volume knobs on your amplifier. On the Deluxe Reverb and a lot of other vintage or vintage reissue amps, it's simply one volume. And then to get the tube saturation, you have to just crank up the volume or keep it lower for a clean tone. On an amp like the Blues Junior, you have a volume, which is basically your preamp gain. So that's your overall gain that will ultimately give you drive and distortion. And then a master volume that controls the overall output or level of the amplifiers. All right, let's first take a look at the Deluxe Reverb. I'm set on 2 currently here, so it's going to be clean. I can go to about 3 maybe. It's just, I don't know if you can hear that, but it's just starting to get to that kind of edge of breakup. And if I go to 4, depending on how I dig in on the guitar lightly, but if I dig in, of course, if I crank it all the way, or almost all the way, and one tip would be to, as you increase the level of your non-master volume amp, you want to back off on the bass a little bit because you're now overpowering and saturating the whole circuit. So you want to kind of back off on the bass so you don't get too much of a flubby low end. So here's about 6.5. All right, so now you can hear it breaking up. It's very full and sounds quite wonderful. So let's back that off. Let's go to the Blues Junior. So right now I have volume which is basically the preamp. I have that low and the master low, so we should get a nice kind of clean sound. So as I increase the volume here, you're going to hear a little bit more dirt, a little bit more. And of course, with the master volume, I can take that even louder, which you can't probably hear that on the camera, but in the room, it's much louder. But if you wanted to go at like bedroom level, and you're rehearsing or recording at home, and you don't want to disturb the neighbors, so you can take the master like kind of way down, crank up the pre. So there you can hear the gain, and it's not ear-shattering, which is really cool. But from there, I want to show, the reason I have the pedals hooked up here, I have some drives and some delay and reverb. So again, to take it even further, so say you're at home, you're recording, you're maxed out on the gain, but you want to take it to the next level. So, let's hit an overdrive. And I have the gain on the overdrive set fairly low, but the volume is higher, so I'm pushing the front end of the amp. So now with the volume low, fairly clean, I can crank up the volume on the guitar, more gain, and then I can hit even additional gain off the floor here. All right, let's go back to the deluxe reverb. Let me show you that amp cranked up, and then I'll add the gain from the overdrive pedal on the floor here. Let's go to about 6. I'm going to back off of the bass a little bit more. Let's hear that. And add in the overdrive pedal. And while I have the pedals here in the AB switch, one really cool thing with this custom deluxe reverb, because both channels are sharing the reverb and trem, the way this amp is designed, you can literally use an AB-Y switch, so either channel or both together. So I now have the outputs from the Fender AB-Y pedal going into both channels of the amplifier. So that way you can set up one channel to be a little bit darker, one a little bit brighter, one a little bit louder, one a little bit quieter. So right now I just have the vintage to be a little bit brighter, and then the custom channel a little darker. So I think we can hear that. This is, so I'll just switch between the two. Hopefully you could hear that. One's a little bit softer and more mellow, the other one's a little bit brighter. But you can also use both together to combine the two channels. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about attenuation. You may have heard that term in the amp world. An attenuator is a device that sits between the amplifier and the speaker. And what that does, it allows you to crank the amp up on the front end, get that sweet spot, that natural distortion, but then you can control the overall volume of the amplifier. So if you're doing late night recordings at home and you don't want to wake up the neighbors, you can get it at a bedroom level, but still get that kind of sweet spot. And in a lot of cases, manufacturers make these units with a line out, so you can actually record directly into your DAW without having to mic the amplifier. So it's a nice thing you might want to explore if you're looking for a solution for a smaller space or a quiet space that'll allow you to get really close to what the amp might sound like cranked, but you're able to control the volume.
Hello, I'm Natsuma and I'm here at the Fender Showroom in London. There's something really warm about Fender amps and I just gravitate towards them. With valve amps in general, there's just a quality that you just can't quite get with anything else. It's just, I don't even know how to describe it, it's just this richness. And it's like how, you know, vintage clothing is like, you can tell when it's a remake or it's vintage. You can just sense that with valve amps.
All right, so Rick, my good friend Rick, we have a stack, a collection, a bevy, is that a word, bevy?
I call it the Wall of Doom.
Of Wall of Doom, of smaller wattage tube amps. And we have, what's the range? So I know we have 5 watts on the Vibro
Yeah,
chip?
so the Vibro Champ reverb is 5 watts, as is the 57 Custom Tweed Champ, 5 watts.
15 on the
Blues Junior.
Junior.
Yeah, that's the lacquer tweed version. Flanking on the ends there are the Princeton reverb, and that's 12 watts. And then the 57 Custom Deluxe is 12 watts.
Got it.
And then right in the middle there, Deluxe reverbs, 68 Custom, and the 65 reissue. Those are 22 watts.
I want to make sure we talk about kind of like, you know, usage of different amps, right? So I always think of like the lower wattage amps. Like if you're going to play and record at your house and you want to have that cranked, you know, tube amp sound. So low wattage, like a, I love the Princeton. This is my Tweed Deluxe. I love the Tweed Deluxe as well. So you can kind of crank those and not shatter the windows of your home and still get that nice tube saturation. All right, so maybe before we go any further, we'll demonstrate the tube amp, kind of like set volume a little bit lower, clean, and then we'll crank it.
Okay, so
We'll
I'm
do,
actually on the 57 Custom Deluxe.
Okay.
Volume's at about 3, because back in the old days, you had a microphone input and you also had an instrument input. So I'm using both those volumes at about 3 or 4, and then the tone is set at about 8.
Let's hear it.
Beautiful, sparkling, clean tones.
And you were full volume on the
Full
guitar?
volume on that.
All right,
yes.
so now let me do some cranking of the volume.
Okay, so now we're gonna do something that was not intended back in the day. We're gonna turn the amps up. I'm actually gonna just dime them. It's funny you say dime because I realize these go to 12. So it's more like a dozen.
Okay.
Anyway, okay. So now when I play and hit the chords, it's gonna distort in a really pleasing way.
Right, and then so old school channel switching used to be just rolling off the volume as it cleans up. Let's kind of demonstrate how you can do like a rhythm and then like all the way up for like a lead kind of thing.
Okay.
So guitar volume down. Start rolling it up. So I think that's why, you know, smaller wattage amps, if you're looking for an amp for bedroom recording, at home recording, smaller venues, just studio where you just want one great amp and you want to crank it to do all that kind of stuff, this is where all these smaller wattage, lower wattage amps come in, like the Princeton Reverb. Here it is, this is on 3. Right, so I'm gonna crank it up to about 7, roll the bass off a little bit there in treble. So now it's on 7. A little louder, reverb down just slightly.
With tube amps, because they are not like solid state or other things where you just turn it up and the volume just increases, with tube amps, because of the tubes, the power amp, the whole thing, turning an amp up to a certain volume is where you yield the best results, where you start to hear the sound of the tubes, the compression, the warmth. So for a lot of people, they don't realize if they get an amp that's too big for their application, they're going to not be able to turn up loud enough and then get that beautiful sound that Fenders are known for.
Let's plug into this 68 to the board. Taking this one. You want to go into the vintage or the custom channel?
You can go to the vintage channel.
Vintage? Okay.
Yeah. Maybe set the volume at about 4-ish or so.
All right, so we're at 4. And then I'm going to keep fairly level on the EQ. All right, so I want to show, let's show first like just the clean sound, cleanish, right? So play a little bit. So it might be hard to hear, but it's just on the edge of starting to break up. All right, so I'm going to crank it a little bit more, and then kind of dig in with the brick. Let's kick on the overdrive. So next level, like lead sound. Nice. All right, so now, again, if you want just a clean platform, a nice clean amp, clean-ish, and you want to use your own favorite distortion or fuzz pedals, we have a Pugilist distortion, which is my absolute favorite distortion pedal. So play a little bit. We're on about almost 4, so cleanish kind of sound. And then kick in the distortion. Love it. So again, there's your clean sound, there's your overdrive sound. You can have several, you can have distortion, fuzz, overdrive, any combination of that, and get all those great different sounds just by going straight into your pedal board and then into your amplifier, which is kind of set clean. And that's a great platform to begin with and do whatever you need to do with it.
Yeah.
And so the Vibrochamp, you want to plug into the Vibrochamp?
Sure.
And I think a lot of classic albums, guitar players, where you might have thought you listen to the record and it's like, oh, this huge guitar sound, there must have been this massive stack, whatever. But in a lot of cases, they were just a small champ, just cranked.
Yeah.
Because it was very manageable. It wasn't overly loud. It's 5 watts.
Volume's on 9.
Okay.
Treble I've got a little lower because I've got a Strat on about 3.5. I've got the bass up a bit. And this Vibrochamp reverb actually has, it has a reverb built into it. So I'm going to have a little splash of that. But
Okay.
this has a lot of compression and sag when you play. So it's that sort of
The amp was actually
angry.
moving off. It's the power of rock. Yeah, so I just turned the reverb down a little bit. But yeah, that's like, and it does the same thing if you were to turn the volume down on the
yes.
guitar. So you still get that. There's your clean channel.
Yeah, and I would say something that's really important is that the thing about these amps is whatever guitar you play, when you play a Tele, it sounds like a Tele. When I play a Strat, it sounds like the Strat. It brings the sound of the guitar through, I think.
Again, like when I'm looking for that perfect instrument, my reference is based on what hip hop taught me. And when it comes to bass lines, those bass lines punch. And I always wanted to be able to do that by myself in the studio, have those bass lines, give me that bottom end, but make it punchy. So one of my dear friends, Jack Watterson, who owns Future Music, I asked him like, yo man, what do you do? Like, what do people do to get that punchy sound? when I'm listening to like Ennio Morricone soundtrack, or I'm listening to Beach Boys, he types, so how did they get that punch? And he's like, bro, use a twin. And I was like, yo, but it's a guitar amp. And he was like, yeah, but guitar amp, it will give you that tone. It's made to give you that tone. And I just started thinking about it, and I was like, damn, that makes sense, because bass amps are made to kind of push the bottom. Guitar, if you tweak it right, will push a lot of that mid-range. But the twin is built so great that it'll still push the bottom while pushing the top. And what happens is that it's the sweet spot to give you something that cuts through. So again, I always wanted to be able to record new music that sounded like those great samples that hip-hop, those great records that hip-hop sampled. So when I created a song for my Something About April album that was released in 2011, I want to create something that some hip-hop star is gonna sample so that I won't be broke anymore. And what happened was, I came up with this bass lick with my P bass at the time through a twin, and it sounded like this. It's just that bass line, and then that Timbaland ended up sampling that for Jay-Z's Magna Carta album, which actually kicked off the album with Picasso Baby. So that sound, the P bass, through a twin, gives that punch. And if you listen to that song, it's called Sirens, the original one that they looped, you'll hear the punch. So I guess my mission was accomplished. Use a twin. Don't be afraid to use guitar amps or bass.
Let's take a look at a few different amp setups. There's the combo amp. We call it a combo because it has both the amp itself, which is electronics, and the speaker or speakers housed in one cabinet. Easy to transport, plug straight in, or plug your pedal board into the front of the amplifier. And then you have the head and cabinet setup. The head houses the electronics and the cabinet houses the speakers. And you need to connect the head to the cabinet with the speaker cable being sure to match the proper impedance of the head to the cab. This is a nice option if you'd like to have the ability to add speakers of your choice, so like a single 10-inch, a 12, a 15, and multiple speakers, 210, 410, 212, or 412. And the cabinet can be either open back or closed back. Open back cabinets generally offer a more airy, spacious sound, and closed back cabinets provide a tighter, more focused sound with a stronger low end and more direct projection. We showed you a few examples in this video of adding pedals to your amp. So let's dive in a little deeper. So if you have a pedal board with a bunch of effects, including boost, drive, distortion, and or fuzz, chorus, flange, delay, and reverb, you can be right at home plugging this board directly into your amp and keeping the gain or the volume of your amp lower so that you have a basic clean sound with all of your pedals off. If you intend to set your tube amp loud enough to where it naturally distorts, a lot of players will use boost, overdrive, distortion, fuzz, or wah into the front end of the amp. You can start with a bass tone of your choice and then add the layers on top of it for a variety of tones. Here's where it gets a little tricky. So if you also want to use time-based effects like chorus, flanger, delay, and reverb, those typically behave better if they're placed after overdrives and distortions. And an amp with an effects loop could be a good option for you. The effects loop places any effects you add to that loop post-distortion, so after distortion. If you'd like to use your time-based effects into the front end of a tube amp, it's recommended to keep the amp set fairly clean. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the use of an attenuator can help you control overall loudness of an amp, but let you crank the amp to its sweet spot or to where it's naturally distorting, and could even allow you to record directly into your DAW. A lot of players will use an attenuator for small club gigs, and of course, for at-home playing or recording.
Well, while we're talking about tube amplifiers, I feel like I should mention that the Blues Junior is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. And for a lot of players, this was their entry level into the tube amp spot. There's a really good reason for that. The Blues Juniors sound great. They're 15 watts. They're easily portable. They're also very affordable. They might be the most successful tube amp that we've ever made before. So to celebrate the 30th anniversary, we want to do something a little special. So if you look at it, it's slightly different. Right there, you've got the Western tooled leather look to it. It's vinyl covering that's different than the original, just traditional black vinyl covering. You have a leather handle that's on there. The grill cloth is brown and gold, like all our 57 Customs, which is a nice finish. We've also added a chrome panel on top to give it a traditional tweed look to it as well, with black chicken head knobs. It's a really nice look compared to the traditional black with cream colored chicken head knobs. It's a nice little touch. Sonically, we changed the speaker to a Celestion Creamback G1265. Now this speaker is a great sounding speaker for clean and dirty. The clean tones are creamy and warm. The distortion is throaty and very British flavored. It takes pedals like a champ, and it adds its own distinctive sort of flavor to the amplifier. Now these amps are limited edition for this year, and they all come with a certificate of authenticity. So I'd highly suggest checking one out and getting one, because when they're gone, that's it.
And so we're back, and magically somehow, all of our low wattage amps have turned into loud amps, which is a good thing. Rick, why don't you run us through from right to left? What do we have here?
Yeah, so we've got the Hot Rod Deluxe at 40 watts. We've got the Bassman here at 40 watts. Panoverb is 70 watts combined with both sides. Super Reverb's roughly 40 watts. Twin is 85 watts of pure power. The thing about the Bassman is, roughly in the 60s, they became kind of the go-to amp for guitarists. In the UK, a lot of very famous guitarists were asking for that sound. They wanted this amplifier. They had a really hard time finding it. So there was an English company that had their own music shop that pretty much took the essence of what this amp was. They changed the transformer, they changed the tubes, they separated into a head and a cabinet, and it became ubiquitous with that company and essential to their sound. Now, it does sound very different than a Bassman, but that's where its DNA got started, was with this amp. Yeah, so to me, this is sparkle and articulation. So really beautiful, clean, articulate.
And you're set on, volume-wise, you're at like?
Roughly four.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, and something to keep in mind too is this, on these original amps, they have 4 inputs instead of 2 and 2 separate channels. But they are interactive even when you don't have cables plugged into them. So you can actually blend the 2 channels to get different sounds, which a lot of people found out later. So should I turn it up?
Turn it up.
All right, let's do it.
So you're gonna go to what?
I'm going
just
to keep
gonna-
everything the
you're
same,
just
but I'm
gonna
going to
go-
turn up both
No.
to about 9
okay.
on there.
Here we go.
All right. So now we're getting into rock and roll territory, and this is why guitarists really liked it.
That sounds great. Now, this is a no reverb amp. Of course, you can add your pedals and you can add modulation or reverb in front of the amp.
Yeah, we should mention 410s in
410s,
this.
yeah,
4
yeah.
Alnico 10
So you're pushing
speakers.
a lot of air. You're
Yes,
cranking
and
it,
they
yeah.
have their own distinctive sound. Part of that, the 10s give it its unique flavor.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the 65 twin reverb. This is a 212, what's the wattage, 85 watts?
85 watts.
It's a very loud amp. Again, great foundation for pedals. There are players, of course, that have been touring with these amps for years and cranking them and getting the most amazing tones, filling arenas and stadiums, and they're just kind of old reliable. Now, I have this set on about 4, and just to give you an example, it's going to be very clean. We can take it to like 9 and 10, and it's just breaking up. Again, it's that headroom that gives you that ample kind of clean tone as opposed to like a 5 or 12 watt, whatever, which breaks up relatively quick. This is going to stay cleaner for a little bit longer. All right, so here's just, So I hope that translates, but it's very clean and solid and big.
It's
all around.
bold,
Yeah, bold,
and the attack is very immediate. Where like with the Basement, I feel like it sags a bit. That is like, it's hitting you with full force.
Give us a little background on this amp.
Well, yeah, this was something that was a bit of a journey. I guess it was 2020. Had the conversation with Jack. He had 3 different amps that he absolutely loved, and he wanted to combine those into something. He's very much into the number 3. So how can we put these 3 amps into one amplifier? If you notice, it's got 3 different distinct areas that you have. Very, very unique things in mind. It has a 15 and a 10, which is not like anything we've done before. It has harmonic tremolo. We talked about tremolo. There are different types of tremolo. That's very unique, and that was something very specific to the early 60s amplifiers. And then it has the ability to run the tremolo in stereo or mono. And then the reverb, you can split between the 2 speakers or have it in both, which he likes to have them mic'd separately. And then when you get the tremolo going in the reverb, it gets very swirly.
You mentioned 3. It makes sense now that when he tours with 3 of these amps.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yes, he's very much into that.
And this
so.
has a built-in, it has an added drive hitting the front end of the amp as well, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's like a boost. Like the word drive, some people assume it's distortion. What it's really doing is it's pushing the amp into natural distortion by hitting the front end of it.
Got it.
And he uses that just to kind of get natural power tube distortion. He doesn't like the sound of like preamp gain, like a lot of high gain amps.
sure.
He likes the amp kind of a little bit nasty around the edges.
It's a hearty tone. he has.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You want to just play a little bit and kind of mess around with the controls and There you go.
All right, we've got one input. You notice the number 3,
3 on the
above
input,
it. Yes. So right now I have the drive hitting the front end, which is adding articulation without getting the gain too high up or the distortion from the amp coming up. Let's put this on the intensity so you can really hear that.
Oh, yeah.
Very swirly.
The adjectives, right?
Yes.
I'm thinking of swirly and meaty, and it's real like chewy,
Yes.
that tremolo, yeah.
Yeah, so if we add a bit more of the mix on the reverb, and it has bass and treble controls, now you have very... Take down the...
So is that tremolo into the reverb, or is it reverb then? How's
It
that
goes
lined up?
it goes reverb into the tremolo.
Into the tremolo.
So
okay.
yes.
Got it.
So I mean, you can, if you want, you can get very... very swimmy. Or let's crank the amp up
Okay.
with the drive.
And there's single coil pickups in that guitar.
Yes.
And that you're getting that kind of gain out of it. It's incredible.
Yeah, and when
There's
Jack
the
plays,
settings,
he's got pickups with a little bit more power, so they're again pushing it even harder in the front, and then all the pedals. So, yes, when you see him on tour, he's got 3 of these, and it's quite the sound. So you can tell that the Pandoverb is similar size to the Super. I don't want to forget mentioning the Super, which in itself, for a lot of blues players, Derek Trucks, amazing slide player. He sets that to a loud volume, and then again, he uses the controls in his hands to create all the tones that he makes. The 10-inch speakers in that, while the circuit may be similar to a Twin in theory as far as what's inside, when you hear the speakers, when you hear the output power, they respond very differently. So with that one, he feels that it gives him that singing tone that he gets, and so a lot of blues players tend to favor that amplifier.
Yeah, and I don't want to forget about this because it's one of our most popular tube amps is the Hot Rod Deluxe.
Yeah, actually, I think we've sold more hot rods over the years than we have some of the other amps that we've made, because for a lot of players, again, great tonal foundation. It does have an overdrive channel. It has reverb. It's one of those amps that you can play anywhere around the world, and I think that's what happens with a lot of players. They go to Japan, they go to Australia. They know what they're going to get from that. They get their sound.
Right.
And it's consistent.
And it's an affordable amp. So, I think I tell people sometimes, they ask me what's a good tube amp to start with. I kind of go middle of the ground, not like low wattage, not high, but like the Hot Rod's a great starter tube amp. You have both channels. You have a clean channel, you have an effects loop, you have the dirty channel, and it's got reverb and all that stuff. And then it also takes pedals well.
Yeah, it has an effects loop as well.
And you can crank that, even the clean channel, you can crank it.
Yes, and it
and
will
get that
distort.
big kind of spark. Yeah. So we want to hear that
Sure,
real quick?
let me,
Which channel are you
This
on?
is on the clean channel. So again, I think there's something in people's minds when they know Fender tone,
Yep.
they know what to expect. So there's a it's beautiful, articulate. I mean, I've got some reverb on there, but which is great.
Nice.
Probably if I was going to go on the drive channel, which I am, I'll probably bring down the reverb a little bit. And this does have two different drive settings. You have kind of this setting, which is the drive. And then more drive.
I just gotta say, all these amps,
Yeah.
but that one in particular, really shines when it's pushed a little bit louder. And again, when you're moving that air in the speaker, it's the whole thing. It's not just plugging in. It's like the beauty of it. It comes out when you're moving the air, hitting the tubes harder, and it just does its thing.
There's definitely something about preamp tubes and power tubes working together that creates a sound that, to me, sometimes sounds better than just preamp tubes only.
Sure.
It's like the amp is all working as like one unit, and you definitely hear it and feel it when you play it.
Yep.
So I'm going to add the more drive.
Okay.
And this might be too much drive for some people. It depends on the
Too much
application,
drive?
right?
And then rolling off in the volume, it just cleans up a little bit. Yeah, so it's still
So yeah, it will clean up.
nice. Yeah.
Even on the more drive channel.
That's great. Yeah, and again, this amp has an effects loop. So if you wanted to use the distorter channel, you can do that and add your time-based like chorus and flanger or delay in that effects loop and have it all work together really nicely. Yeah.
There's a reason that they've been around almost 30 years at this point.
Great job, Rick.
I'd love to take credit for that one. I can't, but I am very happy with how well they've done, and I would play one any day.
Sweet. Same. Same, ditto. I mean, I know we've offered so many tube amps over the years, you know, amps that have been on stages around the world. I'll ask you, like, so where are we headed, the future of tube amps?
Well, the wonderful thing about being at Fender is that we still cherish the legacy of our tube amps. So they're not going away. We know that players still love them. So we have tube amps that will be coming in the future. Some that harken back to the classics. Some will have their own unique spins. But then we also do things like the Tone Master amps, where we're emulating those tube amps and getting really, really close. And that makes them lighter and easier to use in some applications. And even the Tone Master Pro, where we're imparting a bit of that tube magic into it, so that you get there and you get the feel and the sound, a lot of the stuff, and it just makes it easier to record at home. So we have digital options, which is great. We have tube options, which is great. It really just depends on what you want to do and
There
how
are a
you're
lot
gonna
of
use it.
players out there that have different needs and different, I mean, I think it's wonderful that we give them so many options and a starting place, whether they want to go, head first into tubes or start with any one of our, solid state or Tone Master amps. I think that's, great.
I think a lot of young players start in those digital realms where it's like a lot of great sounds on one, and then they make the journey to tubes at some point to kind of see what it's about.
All right, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed our tube amp episode. Be sure to tune in to the next episode where we'll take a first look at mods. That's modifications and upgrades you can do to personalize your guitar or bass. And tell us what you'd like us to talk about next by leaving a comment. And you can check out all the amps we talked about in this episode on Fender.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.